Welcome, everyone, and good morning to all. We gather online for worship this morning due to the wintry weather conditions in our region, and we are so glad that you are here. We begin our service with a musical prelude of the hymn, Morning Has Come.
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. A new day dawns, once more the gift is here. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Welcome, everyone, to this online worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Charlottesville. My name is Reverend Leah Derlins Jones, and my pronouns are she and her, and I am pleased to be leading worship this morning with my colleague, Reverend Tim Temerson. We offer a special welcome to any newcomers who are with us this morning. We are so glad that you have joined us. I invite us now to take a moment to greet each other by putting a note in the chat box and just looking around at each other in our boxes on our screens and waving and offering greetings. So good to see you all. Now notes are coming into the chat, so take a minute to read those. Wonderful. Well, it is such a gift to be able to gather here, and we offer our thanks to our AV Tech Team support this morning provided by Rachel Buckland, who you may notice is the sole individual in the congregation's building this morning. She walked over from where she lives and is Zooming with the equipment that we have in the sanctuary, and we are so grateful. And now I would like to offer greetings from board member Renee Brett.
Sorry, I had to have the host unmute me. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you for being there. And hopefully it's not raining when it's time for you to leave. On behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome everyone. It's great seeing everybody's smiling faces. The rain started as if on cue, right when the music started here, rain and sleet here in Ruckersville. So I am grateful that we got to stay in our warm houses. One thing I want to hold up this morning is that wonderful email that came out on January 13th from the UUCville Stewardship Steering Committee. I just hope everyone had a chance to look at it. I'm going to go back and look at it again. So much good information. I love the theme of warmth and light because we could all use all of that right now. And the save the dates with the little candles at the end of the email are amazing. So I also would like to say the board meeting is this Wednesday on Zoom. Don't forget, all are welcome, and you can find that on the website through a link. You can go to the menu, About Us, and Board of Trustees, and then you can join there on the link if you're interested. It's always welcome to all, but I just thought I would hold that up today, and it's great to be here with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Appreciate you bringing greetings from the board this morning. Here are this week's announcements. The fundraising luncheon supporting our youth service trip to Appalachia this July has been postponed until next Sunday, January 26th. So we hope everyone who is able will come and enjoy a delicious meal of soup and mac and cheese and more, with all proceeds benefiting our youth service trip. If you would like to be a Sunday morning greeter and think this might be a way that you would like to serve UUCville, the membership committee is looking for a few more Sunday morning greeters to welcome folks before the service at the Edgewood Lane door and the Rugby Road door. So if this is something that you would be interested in doing, we would love to hear from you, and you can contact membership at UU Charlottesville and they will get you all set up to be on one of our greeter teams. Our pre-K tutoring program with Sin Barreras will be resuming in the next 2 weeks, and we are hoping to make the program accessible to more children and their parents by offering rides to the classes, which will take place on Mondays and Wednesdays from 10 to 11:30 a.m. at Church of the Incarnation beginning on February 3rd. The church will be providing car seats. So if you are able to be part of a ride team in which you would pick up a parent and a child at their home, you could then take them to the Church of Incarnation and then back home after the class. So we're really hoping to have a nice core of people who would like to do this so that we can make our program that we're offering even more available. You can contact Mary Beth Wiley at rides@uusharlottesville.org if this is something that you could help make happen. And those are our announcements this morning. Now we have our call to worship.
Yes, thank you, Reverend Leah. Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you. I'm so delighted that we have this ability that we really cultivated during the pandemic to gather when circumstances keep us from being together in person. So it's just wonderful to see all of you. So our call to worship this morning comes from Lindsay Bates, and Reverend Leah and I will share it with you. Let us open our minds to the challenge of reason and our hearts to the healing of love.
Let us open our lives to the calling of conscience and our souls to the comfort of joy.
Astonished by the miracle of life.
Grateful for the gift of companionship.
Confident in the power of love and justice.
Come, let us worship this day together. If you have a chalice or a candle nearby or with you at home, I invite you to light it now as I light a flaming chalice, the symbol of our free faith for all of us. And I invite you to please join with me in the words of our chalice lighting. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. And now let's do our chalice lighting with our hand motions. Your hand out flat like the matchbook and your finger is the match. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is a church of open minds. This is a church of helping hands. This is a church of loving hearts. Please join me now in our opening hymn, number 368. Now let us sing.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice. Be not afraid.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the hope within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the hope within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your voice. Be not afraid. Sing to the power of the hope within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the love within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the love within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your
Be not
voice.
afraid.
Be not
Now let
afraid.
us
Sing to the power of the love within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the joy within.
Now let us
Sing to the power of the joy within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your
Be not
voice.
afraid.
Be not afraid. Sing to the power of the joy within.
I invite us all now into a time of centering. If you will, just notice where your body is in space, whether you're in a chair or on your floor or wherever you may be. Just pause. Close your eyes if you like. Sink in. Notice your breath as we enter into a time of meditation, prayer, and centering. Spirit of life, spirit of love, mystery greater than all and beyond our understanding. On this day, full of wonder and so much uncertainty, we gather in blessed community to help each other remember that we are not alone. For those of us worried or sad, may there be moments here that comfort us with a sense of ease and peace, even if briefly. For those lonely or troubled, may there be moments here that smooth the rough edges of life and offer us a glimmer of hope. For those disparaging or angry, tired or hopeless, may we know that love is stronger than hate and that together we can use the power of love to guide us, sustain us, and energize us as we move forward together into whatever future awaits. For those feeling peace, ease, or joy, Know that we need your love and light now more than ever. For together, we are so much more than we can ever be on our own. We need each one of us to help spread love, light, hope, and justice, encircling ourselves, each other, our communities, our country, and the wider world. Let yourself be held in the larger love that holds us all. We pause now in a time of silence together. Amen, and blessed be. We are an interconnected community that cares for one another, and part of how we embody this care is by making time each week to share the joys and the sorrows that we hold in our hearts. And now I will offer this morning's first reading. This reading is an excerpt from the Edict of Torda, which was adopted in Transylvania in 1568. The edict was written by the Unitarian religious reformed Francis David and was approved by King John Sigismund, the first and only Unitarian king in history. Our reading goes, "In every place, the preachers shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to his understanding of it. And if the congregation like it, well, if not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied. But they shall be permitted to keep a preacher whose teaching they approve. No one shall be reviled for his religion by anyone, and it is not permitted that anyone should threaten anyone else by imprisonment. For faith is the gift of God." Here ends our reading. And now it is time for our weekly offering. This community offers its love and support to what is closest to our hearts. And one way we do this, one way we show our care for one another, is by sharing our financial gifts with our community and the congregation. Our social action collection for the month of January is the Public Housing Association of Residents, or FAR, whose mission is to educate and empower low-income residents to protect and improve our communities through collective action. FAR's education and leadership development programs empower directly impacted people to improve laws and policies. You may be aware that we experienced a glitch last Sunday and the offering was accidentally not part of our worship service. Because of this, and because we are worshiping online this morning, I encourage and invite you to be especially generous in your social action collection gift to FAR. This wonderful organization needs and appreciates our support. Rachel has put up the slide for social action giving, and we invite those of you who would like to and are able to make a gift to FAR. In addition to giving online, if you would like to make a donation to FAR with cash or check, you are invited to do so and bring that to the church with you next Sunday, and those gifts will also be greatly accepted. Along with our social action collection, we invite everyone to financially support the ministries and mission of this community. Through your pledges and weekly Sunday morning offerings, together our financial gifts support UUCville and enable us to put love into action. This is our shared ministry. So I invite you to say along with me the words of dedication for our offering. We accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good. Our second reading this morning is taken from Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay, Self-Reliance. To believe your own thought, to believe what is true for you in your private heart, that is genius. One should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across the mind from within, more than the wisdom of bards and sages. Trust thyself. Whosoever would be called a human being must be a nonconformist. Nothing is as sacred but the integrity of your own mind.
Thank you, Reverend Leah. Good morning, everyone. So, some thoughts to share with you this morning about the readings you just heard. But before I do that, let me just thank everyone in our congregation and in the wider community for your flexibility this morning. So, you may not have thought about the fact that on Saturdays, when there's a tricky Sunday forecast, that ministers spend far too much time going online looking at weather reports. And so I spent more time doing that yesterday than I did perfecting this morning's sermon. So have a little grace and forgiveness. But anyway, yeah, so, but it wasn't a hard decision to make, and Reverend Leah and I were, communicating throughout the day, but, I would never want anyone to have a mishap trying to get to church. So I'm just, so, as I said earlier, I'm so grateful that we have this technology and that we've learned how to use it in a way that can create a worship experience. And I'm just so grateful that there are so many of you have joined us, and I'm also special thanks to those who were planning for their flexibility, planning things at church this morning. The choir is planned a beautiful anthem, which I am hoping and assuming they will sing next Sunday. Our ASP youth, as I think Reverend Leah mentioned, we're going to hold a fundraising lunch again, which will happen next Sunday. And so we're pushing things back a week, but hopefully we won't really miss a beat. And I also want to just give you a little update on the worship calendar. So the service today was going to be a very special and important service in which I was going to share the pulpit with Price Thomas, who is the executive director of City of Promise. And Price has spoken at our church before during the Social Action Collection. But the reason Price was coming back this Sunday was we were going to announce the formation and the beginning of a really exciting and what I think will be impactful and even transformational partnership between our congregation and City of Promise. And what Price has to say, I feel is so important. I didn't want him to share it on Zoom. I really want him in the sanctuary. So I hope that you all will either Zoom in next Sunday, or if you're, be at church, because I think this partnership has the potential to really help our congregation get out into the Charlottesville community and make connections that we haven't always done a great job of making. So this is going to be a really important moment. So please do join us next Sunday. Now, today's service is going to be good, so don't log off yet. I think I've got a pretty good message for you today, but anyway, and we will, by the way, next Sunday be also talking about and honoring Dr. King. So anyway, so looking forward to that. Final point I just wanted to make is that it's just so good to be back with you all. I still haven't been back in the pulpit since Christmas Eve. So I'm not even sure if I can find it, remember where it is. Hopefully, I'll be able to make my way back there next Sunday. And but I haven't been back in a while, and I've been back at church, but not back in the pulpit. Last Sunday, as I'm sure many of you know, Pastor Bates from Ebenezer Baptist was at our congregation, and from all reports I received, preached as always a fabulous, wonderful sermon. And you may or may not know, I was actually at Ebenezer last Sunday, and shared what I hope and what I think was an impactful message with them. You know, it's always enjoy preaching there. They're such a warm and loving and welcoming congregation. Pastor Bates is so encouraging, and you know, he always tells me, so just remember, Pastor Tim, the only thing I require is make sure you say something about Jesus. So I did, and put in a good word for Jesus. And so I think my message was reasonably well received. And in fact, I wanted to begin this morning by sharing with you something that Pastor Bates did that I wasn't expecting, but I was so delighted by. And when I got to Ebenezer, the first thing that I received, they always hand me, is the bulletin, and they have a paper, order of service, paper bulletin. And what really surprised me was that on the cover of that bulletin, Pastor Bates had found online this image, this sort of flower design of our sort of core UU values with love at the center. I picked the bulletin up and I said, I've seen this before. This looks a little familiar. And so I was just delighted that he had found that and decided to share it. And it was perfect as well, because my particular take on Jesus, as it often is, was that Jesus centered love. And that was certainly my message at Ebenezer on Sunday. And again, a message I think that was fairly well received. And I think it's fair to say that we're hearing a lot about Unitarian Universalism and at UUCville about love. Our mission calls us to build a community through love in action. Our not new, but our sort of reimagined values remind us that love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. And of course, we get that heritage very much. And thank you, Carol Gardner. Yes, you just put in the chat, and I meant to mention this, so thanks for the reminder, that our Neighboring Faiths class, which is our middle school faith development class, was due to go to Ebenezer, I think, today. And but that I'm sure will be rescheduled. And as part of their journeys to go to visit different faith traditions, different communities, different congregations, which is, one of the great things about our religious education for children and youth and adults, I would add. So while we're hearing so much about love, and we're really centering love, and we're drawing on the roots and the heart and soul of our Universalist side, what I want to do today is to lift up what I see as the other pillar of Unitarian Universalism, and that is religious freedom, freedom of conscience, the freedom to explore, to question, to believe, to not believe, to doubt, to feel certain. The simple truth is that we Unitarian Universalists believe in that freedom is at the heart of what it means to be a human being, and I would add, to be a person of faith. Now, I don't know if we have many folks today on Zoom who are joining us today who are reasonably new to Unitarian Universalism, but at first glance, when you think about religion in sort of the way we often think of it in a traditional sense, centering freedom to question, the freedom to doubt, may sound a little strange. I mean, isn't the model of religion that many of us grew up understanding and perhaps still here. Isn't that model more about obeying and obedience rather than questioning? Having faith rather than challenging assumptions with reason, and valuing and centering certainty rather than uncertainty. Well, it is kind of strange for a religion to be so rooted in freedom, but that's exactly where Unitarian Universalism comes from. And it's very much about what we're about to this very day. We believe, as I said a minute ago, in the beauty and the blessings of the free mind, of the critical mind. Doubt and uncertainty are as important in our spiritual lives as our most deeply held beliefs. And we believe that religion and religious choices, that religion and the religious choices people make, those choices must never, never, never be a reason to hate, to exclude, or to harm. Freedom in Unitarian Universalism is a holy truth. So I want to take a few minutes this morning to tell you a little bit about the story of how we got this way, how freedom of religion, freedom of conscience became the cornerstones of Unitarian Universalism. It's a fascinating story and one that's not well known beyond our faith. Many of you may know it. Some of you may not have heard it in a while. So hopefully this will, you'll find this to be meaningful. Now, I want to be clear at the outset that this story is not perfect. It has its ups and downs, high points, and low points. We Unitarian Universalists have not always lived up to our commitment to freedom of conscience, and we have at times been guilty of intolerance and exclusion. But we've never lost our commitment to freedom. That has always endured. And that commitment always calls us back, I think, to our best selves and to the heart of our faith. So here's the story. I think it was 6 or 8 years ago that many of our Christian siblings celebrated the 500th anniversary of one of the momentous events in the history of religion and in the history of Unitarian Universalism. And that, of course, was the Protestant Reformation. Now, the Reformation, I won't say, as you'll recall, because I don't think any of us actually remember the Reformation. It was launched back in the early 1500s by Martin Luther. Luther was pretty angry about what he saw as the corruption of the Roman Catholic Church. He even drafted a set of 95 bullet points, although the more technical term is theses. He then famously nailed them to the door of what was then the Catholic Church in Wittenberg, Germany. And we see that as the beginning of the Reformation. That was in 1517, for those of you who like dates. Now, although there were no Unitarian or Universalist churches when Luther launched the Reformation, the ideas at the heart of both of our traditions were alive and soon became part of the Reformation. And the most famous and important purveyor, and the person I'd like to begin telling you a little bit about, was an extraordinary scholar, thinker, and polymath. This guy was interested in everything and knew about just about everything, named Michael Servetus. Here is a picture, a drawing of him. Now, Michael Servetus was born in the late 1400s and he was basically a contemporary of Luther. Luther was probably a little older than him. Servetus was a Spaniard, and in the centuries before his birth, Spain had experienced a wonderful period of at least interreligious understanding and tolerance as Muslims, Jews, and Christians lived side by side, working together and even learning from one another. But as monarchs like Ferdinand and Isabella, they were pretty big troublemakers in history overall. Think about all the mayhem they led to in the quote unquote New World. Ferdinand and Isabella, as leaders like that, grew more powerful and unified Spain under a single Christian flag. The tolerance, the golden age of Spanish tolerance, gave way to religious oppression and eventually, of course, the Inquisition. Now, Servetus himself grew up in a wealthy Catholic family that still embraced that spirit of toleration and learning that had once characterized all of Spain. He was permitted to read widely and critically and to explore the ideas of faith traditions other than Christianity, like Judaism and Islam. Now, here's where the brilliant part comes in. He trained to become a doctor, but in his free time, he mastered many, many languages and could read the Bible in both the original Hebrew and Greek. And he was one of the few people that we are aware of in Europe who actually could read the Quran in Arabic. And I don't think there were really any translations around at that time. So he could read Hebrew, Greek, and Arabic. And what Servetus concluded from all of his religious or scriptural studies was that many of the core doctrines of the Catholic Church at the time, and especially the doctrine of the Trinity, the idea that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that doctrine is not based in Scripture and should therefore be rejected. God, according to Servetus's reading of the Bible, is a unity, not a trinity. And it is that concept of the unity of God that gives us the name Unitarian. I'm not sure how many of you were aware of that, but that's where the term Unitarian comes from. Now, it's not my purpose today to give you a long discourse on the intricacies of Christian theology or the soundness of the doctrine of the Trinity. As I think anyone who has worshiped at our congregation or really in any UU congregation, we have long since moved beyond the Unitarian Trinitarian debate. We just don't talk about it anymore. Quite frankly, from a place from where we have one arching overall theological perspective on the nature of God. Today, Unitarian Universalism embodies broad, almost limitless theological pluralism, a pluralism that welcomes and embraces those who believe in God, in one God, in many gods, or in no God at all. All of these perspectives are welcome and celebrated in Unitarian Universalism. Now, Michael Servetus's life took a decisive and dangerous turn in the early 1530s when he published a book with a very catchy title, On the Errors of the Trinity. Very, very snappy. Now, I say dangerous because although Christian Europe was in the midst of a time of great change, the Reformation, there were some things, some elements of Christian teaching and doctrine that both Catholics and the newly emerged Protestants agreed should not be touched, should not be changed. And one of those was the doctrine of the Trinity. Well, as you can imagine, Servetus's decidedly anti-Trinitarian ideas were very unwelcome, and he was quickly branded a heretic. Servetus had to live all of the rest of his life on the run. He supposedly became a master of disguise. I still think somebody needs to write a kind of an adventure novel about his life, but the ending is pretty bad, as I'm going to tell you in a second. Warrants for his arrest were issued, and he was often, as I said, forced to live and travel in disguise. And I'm sorry to say that his luck ran out in 1553 when the religious authorities in Geneva, Switzerland, spotted Servetus. He was arrested, put on trial, convicted of heresy, and burned at the stake in October of 1553. And by the way, in case you were wondering, the leader of Geneva and the one who ultimately made the decision to execute Servetus was none other than John Calvin. And what was Servetus's crime? Reading a book, drawing his own conclusions about its meaning, and then sharing those conclusions with the world. Now, while it is certainly true that Servetus's ideas about the unity or oneness of God influenced the development of the Unitarian, especially the Unitarian side of our tradition, it was really the circumstances surrounding his death that had the greatest impact on our faith. Let me explain. You see, in the aftermath of Servetus's martyrdom, there emerged in Europe a movement for religious freedom and religious toleration, a movement that challenged the whole concept, the whole idea of heresy, and eventually led to the formation of the first organized religious communities that call themselves Unitarian. And one of the most important leaders and spokespeople in this movement was a scholar and a writer named Sebastian Castellio. And I think I've got a picture of him. Here it comes. Now, it's important to point out that this gentleman, Castellio, he didn't necessarily agree with Servetus's conclusions about the Trinity, but he was outraged that anyone would be put to death simply for speaking their mind and exercising their conscience about religion. Barely a year after Servetus's death, Castellio published a tract called Concerning Heretics, in which he argued, and this is a quote, "The scriptures are full of enigmas and inscrutable questions which have been in dispute for over 1,000 years. And yet on account of these enigmas, the earth is filled with innocent blood." Castellio went on to say very famously, "To kill a man is not to defend a doctrine, it's simply to kill a man." Later in that same essay, Castellio challenged the whole concept of heresy. He reminded his audience, his readers, that the Greek origins of the word heresy mean to choose, to choose. So a heretic is simply someone who makes a choice. And as Castellio and others of this movement for religious freedom pointed out, if heresy is ultimately about choosing, then shouldn't we all be heretics, following the light of our hearts and minds to find a faith that is meaningful for us? Now, the ideas of Castellio and others spread around Europe. Servetus's martyrdom became a symbol of freedom of conscience. And if you travel across Europe today and work hard to find them, you will find statues dedicated to Servetus in a number of European capitals. And here is one of those statues. I think this is the one that is in Geneva, I believe. So yes, and I'm not going to translate the French because I think that French is not very good, but if you read through it, you'll notice that at the bottom, it says that he died in 1553 at the instigation of Calvin. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that Servetus's death led to the end of religious persecution. That's obviously not true. Religiously inspired violence continued among both Catholics and Protestants and was often carried out by the state. But there were exceptions to this chaos in places where the flower of freedom and tolerance bloomed, at least for a while. And it was in one of those places that Unitarian Universalism, and especially Unitarianism, was born. About, 15 or so years after Servetus's death, in the small region known as Transylvania, a religious reformer named Francis David adopted Servetus's Unitarian ideas and embraced the values of religious freedom and tolerance. Like much of the rest of Europe, Transylvania had been plagued by religious division and at times violence. David and his allies won the ear of the young Transylvanian king, John Sigismund, convincing him to call a meeting of religious leaders to discuss the problem of religious conflict and violence. That meeting took place in the small city of Torda, and after significant debate, the edict that Reverend Leah read an excerpt from was adopted, and that's Francis David on the left, and King John, who sadly died at only like 31 or 32 years of age. That's King John on the right. Now, I know that reading that Reverend Leah shared from the Edict of Torda probably didn't sound particularly gripping or revolutionary to our modern ears, but think for a moment about how radical such ideas were in 1568. For the state, and the Edict of Torda was a state proclamation, for the state to proclaim that individuals and churches would be left alone to follow their consciences, and that in the words of the edict, no one shall be reviled for their religion. I mean, come on, that's pretty unheard of and extraordinary in that day. And I would say even for quite a few years after that as well. And as far as we can tell, the edict was one of, if not the first legal proclamation of religious freedom and tolerance in the West. And all thanks to a Unitarian reformer and a Unitarian king. Now, about the same time that King John and Francis David were meeting to develop and approve the Edict of Torda, the first organized Unitarian churches began to emerge in Transylvania and other places that today we would call Eastern Europe, Poland, Czech Republic, and so on. Those churches thrived for a time, but soon confronted the return of religious oppression and intolerance. I mentioned that King John died at a young age, and I'm sorry to say that his successors were not that keen on the edict. But a number of those congregations survived, and thankfully, as we know, Unitarian churches still exist in Transylvania, and our congregation maintains a partnership with one of those churches. Now, I wish I could tell you that since Michael Servetus wrote his influential works and Francis David helped organize the first Unitarian churches, that Unitarian Universalism has always lived up to the ideals upon which we were founded. Like any faith tradition, we have had our proud moments and our moments that we're not so proud of, moments where we've reached for intolerance and closed-mindedness. In fact, critics from within our own faith tradition a few hundred years later, like the great essayist and Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson, have been quick to point out times when we have placed too much emphasis on conformity, going along to get along, too much emphasis on reason and rationality rather than creating spaces where people are invited to listen to and follow the stirrings of their own hearts and spirits and minds. In fact, it was the criticisms, some of them not very kind, of Emerson and fellow transcendentalists like Henry David Thoreau and Margaret Fuller that I think it's fair to say made religious freedom a cornerstone of what has become Unitarian Universalism. And there are the big three, as I like to call them. The Transcendentalists challenged us to see religion and spirituality as being ultimately about the mind, the heart, and yes, the spirit of each and every person, and argued passionately for the liberation of the human spirit from what they saw as the deadening influence of dogma, creed, rigid institutions, and yes, society as a whole. According to Emerson and the others, institutions like the church, including the Unitarian churches of his day, tended to value conformity above freedom, and that such conformity led many in their day to lead lives that were spiritually dry, empty, and filled with what, as I'm sure those of you who have read Thoreau know this phrase, filled with quiet desperation. Now, in many ways, we Unitarian Universalists are still on the journey that Servetus and David and King John and Emerson, Thoreau, and Fuller set for us. We are striving, always striving, to be more free, more open, more accepting, more diverse. We recognize that faith is not something that can be handed down from above or that can be embodied in a creed or a single sacred text. Rather, we see spiritual life as a continuous journey of discovery and exploration, a journey in which every human being must be free to find that which makes their hearts sing and their spirits soar. The fact that we Unitarian Universalists are always striving to make that journey and striving to keep freedom as a cornerstone of our faith is something for which we should be proud and something that we can and must share with the world. Through our words and our deeds, may we always be the religion that breaks down walls of fear and suspicion that separate one faith tradition from another, one race from another, one gender from another. May we be the religion that celebrates the truth and beauty that lives in the whole human experience and in the lives and journeys of all people. May we be the religion that demonstrates that our differences are strength. They don't need to lead to divisiveness, and that human beings can, in spite of those differences, learn together, grow together, work for peace and justice together, and come together to build a world in which all people, no matter who they are, what they believe, where they come from, or who they love, a world in which all people are loved, welcomed for who they are, and treated with the dignity and respect that is the birthright of the human family. Amen, and blessed be. Thank you all so much for listening. Oh, thank you, Rachel. Appreciate the applause. I'm sure there's like a standing ovation in the sanctuary there. Yes. So let's now listen to, and I invite you to join in singing along with our closing hymn, which is one of my favorites. It's very short, but it's so beautiful. Here Together, Going Forth.
We have spent time together, and these holy moments give us strength to go down the winding road until we meet again. We have spent time together, and these holy moments
If you have lit a candle or chalice in your home, I invite you to extinguish it as Reverend Leah extinguishes our community chalice. I also would like to add, before I deliver the words of the benediction, that we will have a brief postlude, a recording of our own Scott DeVoe playing the piano. And then after that, I'm planning to stay on for a few minutes. And if anyone would like to stay on, if enough of you stay, we can maybe break out into different rooms. But if you'd like to stay and just chat about what I talked about this morning, be happy to do that. So leave that up to you. So I want to close with words from another great leader and speaker for religious freedom, another Unitarian and Transcendentalist, Theodore Parker. And he says, "Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love, its profession of faith, divine living." Friends, be well, take good care of yourselves, of each other, and of the world. Be safe out there. Stay home if you can. It's going to get really cold tonight and tomorrow and the next day, so bundle up. And I'm so excited and so much looking forward to seeing you all next Sunday. Blessed be. Go in peace. We'll have the postlude, and if you'd like to hang around for a few minutes, that would be most welcome. Go in peace.